Welcome, everybody, to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast. I'm Pete Wright. There's Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, Nikki Kinzer. How are you feeling about summer?
I'm feeling, well, it's a busier summer than I expected.
Wow, right? I was just talking to my wife about this morning. Like, it feels like every hour is booked.
Right.
For us. Like, every hour.
Well, and it was crazy because when I was scheduling for the summer, my son plays football, and I guess I should be excited about this, but they started a week earlier than normal. And so usually they start like more towards the end of August, but this year they decided to start in the middle of August, and he has to be here for that, right? And so I had to schedule any trips or anything that we were going to do basically all in June and July. And so here we are, and we're at the end of July, and I am tired. I need a vacation from my vacations and from these like weekends away because and I'm still working in between, and
of course,
yeah, it's been a busy summer.
That's absolutely it. I don't know how it happened, but we have made that transition to. I don't know if it's that the kids are of a certain age that they are busier, and that is impacting like the whole family schedules. But it seems like weekday, weekend, morning, noon, night, we've got something going on.
Yep.
That's why I'm so excited about this topic. You are going to talk about how to handle the overwhelmed summer schedule, particularly when you're struggling with ADHD. And that is something that I am personally very interested in.
And I am too. I was rereading my notes. I mean, I'll be honest, like, because I wrote these show notes, it was probably a month ago before I was really in the summer yet. And I was rereading it. And I'm like, okay, so what am I saying I need to do? Because I need to start doing it right away.
No kidding.
I think that, if we're feeling it, I'm sure other people are feeling it as well. I think that there are a few warning signs to kind of be aware of if you are taking on too much. And this first warning sign is definitely me. I am definitely more on the anxious, anxiety-driven side. And so when you start feeling more anxious about your schedule rather than excited about it, that's probably a warning sign. And I honestly had to take a step back because we were celebrating my daughter's birthday. And, I was trying to plan a nice birthday party for her because she's just turning 9. And so for her, of course, birthdays are still so important and such a big deal and such an exciting time. And so I wanted it to be special, but we had planned a vacation right in the middle of planning it. So I had to do so much before we left on vacation. And then I had to like kind of scramble at the end to get it ready because we, came home basically 2 days before the party. Right. And so I'm sitting there and I had to think to myself, okay, take a step back and don't get too caught up in the chaos or the stress of it and just enjoy the moment. It's her day. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be great, and I had to do that because I was feeling more anxious than excited. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. This is not the time and place for that. So definitely be aware of that, right?
Totally.
Really important. Also, I think if you have a tendency to say yes to everything, if you're being asked to do things and your automatic response is to say yes, that's something to be aware of because then you're just adding more stuff on your plate, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. And I think another warning sign to think about is, if you do think you have the time to do something, but then you realize that you don't, and you've already promised something to someone else, and this panic kind of starts to set in, and you start worrying if you're going to disappoint someone, or are you giving up something that you would rather do? I mean, it's just all of that kind of, it kind of boils back down to that anxiety feeling that many of us feel. Okay, so
totally.
Time is a funny thing with ADHD, right? Because for most things always take longer than what we necessarily expect them to take. And so this is where someone with ADHD can definitely get in trouble because they think they have more time. They think they can squeeze one more thing to do. I can do that. Sure, I'll do that. I can do that. And then all of a sudden that panic again comes in and says, okay, no, you can't.
I don't know anything about that.
You really only have 24 hours in the day, and half of that time, or 8 hours of that time, you should be sleeping. Not half.
My 24 hours are all 72 minutes long.
Yeah, right? Whew. Okay, so what do we do?
Yes.
This is important, and this is what I had to reread today. And this goes back to saying yes to everything. Just stop saying yes to everything, right? So simple. Start saying no. And really how to do that is if someone asks you to volunteer or asks you if you want to like go camping this weekend with them or whatever, don't, or I guess not don't, but try to wait before you give a response. So pause for a moment and let them know that you'll get back to them later, that you need to check your calendar, you need to check with your family, whatever it is. But tell them you'll get back to them later. And what it does is it just frees you up that space so that you can actually take the time to go back and evaluate, is this something that's really important to me? Is it something that I really want to do? And is it something that I have time to do? And just, waiting to say yes can make a big difference. And that can take some practice too, because it's very easy to be impulsive and just say, oh, sure, right? Which is what we talked about just a minute ago.
It's the mandatory waiting period for scheduling.
Yes.
You have to have a mandatory waiting period. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. So when you do schedule meetings or events, say that something does come up and it is important to you, then what we want to do is avoid scheduling anything back to back. You got to give yourself a little bit of buffer room. This allows you to be distracted because you know that is probably going to happen. It allows for traffic. It allows basically just for you to not have that anxiety, panic feeling when you're rushing into a meeting, from another meeting, because you need to have that little breathing space to kind of, gather yourself back together and, okay, now where am I? Center yourself. Where am I going?
Well, and that ends up being one of the biggest complaints you hear from people who work the office job, right? Is, oh my gosh, we have meetings and then we have meetings about meetings and they're back to back and I never have time to breathe.
Yes. And, on my own personal experience, I've learned it the hard way is that if I do schedule, I have in the past scheduled clients back to back. So, like an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. Yeah. And what I have found is that the 8 o'clock, great, things are moving along. 9 o'clock, it's pretty good. But that third person, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but that third person, I'm like out of breath. I'm like, okay, I need to, and it's not from talking, but it's just my brain hurts, right?
Right.
Because you've been in these conversations and you're really thinking, and it's like I didn't give myself enough time to regroup. And so I've learned the hard way that I need to at least have 15 minutes in between appointments. Like I can't go just back to back. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, I think there's another piece to that for me, which I learned from a dear friend and therapist. He's a psychotherapist, and he had the same comment. He said, when I first started out, I realized, I need more clients. I've got to pay back my medical bills. He's now been doing this for 12, 15 years, and he says, if it's the challenge is taking a client right after another is okay, but by the time you hit that third client, you have forgotten what you needed to do as an outcome of the first session, in terms of just making notes, in terms of whatever. And it takes 10 to 15 minutes to just sit down and say, you know what, this is part of what I owe that last meeting or that last session or that last client, is to sit down for 15 minutes and document what we talked about so I know what we have to do next. Mm-hmm. And that ends up being super important. If you are in a culture of meeting, you are doing a disservice to the early meetings by not scheduling time to decompress and figure out what is an outcome that you have to take on. You just forget.
Yes, absolutely. Great point. So yes, that's scheduling those meetings not back to back, or like you said, giving ourselves a little bit of buffer room is going to be really important.
Right.
And that's one I'm taking to heart, believe me. Subtracting from your schedule. Now, this is something that you can do, and I know that sometimes people have a hard time with it because they may feel a little guilty if they've already said yes to something. Um, but I think that sometimes we do have to do that, and it's okay if you're really overwhelmed and you're really feeling the chaos outside and inside, and you just need some time to be at home. It's okay to say no, even if you said yes before. And I have a perfect example. I was working with a client, and she had just moved to her new home, and she didn't have a lot of time to actually settle in yet. She had, there were still lots of boxes around, and she has ADHD, and she it was struggling with some things at work too. And so there was just a lot of stuff on her plate. And there was a weekend where her parents or maybe her in-laws or something, I don't know, they wanted her to go to like some lake cabin and, spend the weekend with them. And she had already said yes. And then she actually on her own backed out and said, no, you know what? I think it'd really be best if I just stayed home. I need to move into my house. I need to have those 2 days just to, get some things settled. And that's okay. That's great. I mean, that was probably better for her mental health than actually going away. As wonderful as a cabin on a lake would be, she would have just been sitting there stressing about everything that was back at home.
Totally.
It wouldn't have done her any good. And so I think that coming back and really making that decision of what's best for me right now and for my family, it's okay to back out sometimes.
Well, and that's the vacation from the vacation, we talk about. It's not, right. That's when it's not funny. Like there's a real impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my last tip is something that we have talked about a lot when it comes to time management, and that's that weekly and daily review of your schedule, making sure that you write out all of your appointments on your calendar. I've always recommended that you only use one calendar, and basically why we're doing this is that we just want to have kind of a heads up or a preview of the week, and I think that when you do that, then you sort of plant that seed that it's going to be a really busy week, and this is what I need to prepare for. Rather than being in the middle of the week and feeling like, life is falling apart because it's so busy and you weren't really expecting it, right? So as much as you can expect what's coming ahead, I think is great. And then again in the morning, look at it like on a Sunday or Monday, and then every day in the morning, what's on my agenda today? What do I need to do today that I don't want to forget?
So you do your reviews on Sunday evening and in the mornings.
Yeah, I always do kind of a weekly review on Sunday, and it is not a weekly review that we have talked about like with GTD, right? Uh-huh. With David Allen's weekly review. It's not all of that. I'm not checking or I'm not like looking into my email and all that. All I'm doing is looking at my calendar and looking at what is ahead of me.
Yeah.
And getting a visual sense, because I use iCalendar and everything's color coded. So I know if it's work related, if it's home, or if it's personal. And so I can see green, red, and blue, and I can see exactly just what is ahead. And then now because I'm in school, I have an orange for education. So sure. I can see what classes I'm taking and stuff like that. But, yeah, and then I look again on Monday morning and look and see, okay, what am I doing today?
Yeah. I started, and I don't know if what the benefit is. There was some, I can't remember, was it Hemingway or somebody who said, always stop writing when you have something else to say, right? Stop when you know what's coming next. And so I started doing my daily review at the end of the day, because I'm usually sitting down kind of figuring out what I did and entering, make sure I have all my billable hours in my system, make sure all my meetings are documented, et cetera. And then do my review for, hey, what am I doing tomorrow? And the reason I started doing that, I started doing that for two reasons. First, because I never want to be surprised first thing in the morning.
Right.
And I run into this challenge where I wake up, my alarm goes off, I come down, and the first thing, slam, you have an 8:00 meeting, and I had forgotten it. And so I started that way, just looking at what is the scope of stuff that I have committed to for tomorrow. But the other reason is, I feel like I process pretty well while I'm sleeping.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
if there's a
right.
creative project I have to jump into tomorrow, then I sort of plant the seed the night before. And then when I'm sleeping, usually I'll wake up with kind of a fresh new idea of something that I'm going to need to work on. And that has worked well for me. And I know that, there's certainly no right or wrong, but I just want to plant that out there that doing that review, I think there's something to the subconscious prep work that you do without thinking you're doing it.
Well, and you bring a good point because, like, especially in our business, I am assuming you too, Pete, that you're not always consistent with when you start in the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so and I work with a lot of people on the East Coast, and there's a 3-hour time difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people where I'm starting at 7:00 in the morning because to them it's only 10, or it's 10 and it's 7 for me.
Right.
And I'm an early person anyway, so that doesn't bother me at all. But you make a really good point that that's not all the time, because the very next day, my first appointment may not be until 10:00 in the morning. So just knowing that, and I know the first time I had the 7:00 morning appointment, I kept thinking, don't forget about the meeting. Don't forget about the meeting. Because it was so unusual for me to have it that early. And so, I think you bring up a really valid point, especially if you're a little inconsistent with, when you start.
Yeah, it's just worth considering, in terms of just that prep work for me. And I think for the I don't know, it has helped me in dealing with some of the more ADHD tendencies that I have to, anything I can do to give myself a head start.
It's a good thing.
Is a good thing. Yeah.
That's right. And that's what all of this is about, is trying to do best for you and your schedule and making that anxiety and chaos go away.
That's right. That's
very
right.
good.
What else you got?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Fantastic. This is really useful for me. I'm so glad you put this topic on the calendar. I think hopefully it's useful for others too.
Absolutely.
You don't need to be overwhelmed. Let go of the stress this summer.
Right.
Let the sun feed you. That's the trick.
I love the sun.
I love the sun. Hey, everybody, you can find out more about the show at TakeControlOrganizing.com. You can subscribe for free in iTunes or Stitcher Smart Radio or, any place finer podcasts are served. And you can even listen to the show right online on our website if you want to do that. You can find us on Twitter and Pinterest and Facebook, all of those at Take Control ADHD. And you should join us for the discussion there. It'd be good to have you. I think that's it. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.